Welcome to Sober Speak. This episode is brought to you by Don C. Don C. went to our website, soberspeak.com, clicked on the donate tab, and made a contribution. Thank you so much, Don C., for your generous contribution. This episode is for you. Hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. On our episode today, you will hear from Jacqui. Jacqui will be coming in here to the mic in the Sober Speak studios in just a moment. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic. We are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery and newcomers to this program, Sober Speak. This is a podcast about recovery, centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sober Speak is for those who have not yet made it into recovery, those who are in recovery, and those who got sober a long time ago. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. If you're enjoying the podcast, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what you think. Reach out to us at feedback@soberspeak.com. Just a couple of program notes. We are now available on Spotify for those who like to use that app. And we're available on iHeartRadio. Please remember, we do not speak for any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope for those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want, leave the rest at the curb. But that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and dive into the story. Okay, everybody, so here we are with Jacqui C. And it's Jacqui with a Q, is that right?
Right.
That's Jacqui with a Q. You know, I hate, so obviously in these things I just kind of say what comes to my mind, which kind of works for me and against me. But this maybe be a history lesson for those who are not old enough, but there was a Jacqui television personality when I was a little kid, and she would go around saying, Jacqui! Do you know who I'm talking about at all?
I want to say it was from 227, wasn't that the show?
Was that the show?
I think so.
I don't know. But all I know is that's all she said all the time. I don't think I ever actually watched the show. But anyway, Jacqui. So here we are with Jacqui C today. I'm so sorry to start it out that way. So first of all, Jacqui, why don't you introduce yourself and give your sobriety date?
Hi, I'm Jacqui. I'm an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I've been sober since April 3rd of 2014.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think, so I always kind of think, okay, where do I want to start with this, right? So, in fact, I do know where I want to start with this. I know you brought over something to read today because at my request. Yes. And if you would, go ahead and read from, I think you have the big book there, is that right?
Yes, Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous from the chapter There is a Solution on page 25. And this is my favorite reading. It's what's kind of stood out to me throughout the journey of my recovery. And it says, the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
Okay, I absolutely love that reading. And in fact, I love it so much, I want you to go ahead and read that again, please, if you would, because there's a lot of key information in there, a lot of things that are actually quoted in the rooms of AA on a consistent basis. And for those who have not heard this before, there are, I guess, what you would call promises in AA, right? The promises page 83 and 84. But this is a promise as well. So if you would, please, for me, go ahead and read that again. This is the whole program
for me, really.
Yeah.
The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
I love it. And I'm just thinking of people out there that are listening to this now who possibly don't have a lot of experience with AA, or they have, or they've been on the outskirts of AA, and they wonder about these people in AA, why they're so, I guess, enthralled by it. They commit to it as a way of life, if you will. And I always get a little concerned with people out there thinking that, well, it must be like a cult, right? I mean, I can tell you, I've been around for a long time. It's not a cult. We are just if you want to go find something else, God bless you, we are way behind you, right? And if you can find another way in another life, we're behind you. Nobody's locking you inside the doors of AA. But for those of us who have been around a while, we have found deep and effective spiritual experiences. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that, what it means to you, how it has been applied to your life, and then we'll go into your story from there.
Well, first of all, my mother was an atheist, and so I didn't receive any spiritual direction from her in particular. My father was a Christian, and from my understanding, his family was very strong Church of Christ.
Now, when you say your mom was an atheist, did she practice atheism? I mean, what did everybody know?
She would just say it.
She would say she was. Okay?
She would say it.
And when things like Christmas or
and that's what was so wild. We still participated in all of the Christian holidays, and she expected me and my little brother to go to church when we were asked to go with other family members. But she herself did not have, or at least she expressed to me that she didn't have a connection with God. I figured it was more of an agnostic kind of feeling and spirituality of her perspective. So,
and your father, you said, was
he was Church of Christ, but also didn't enforce or send me with him. He didn't go to church, but he did growing up. And so my understanding, learning from other people, is that he kind of had a bad taste for his own spiritual experience as well.
And do you have brothers and sisters as well?
So I do have a younger brother. He's 4 years younger than me, and he and I both were sort of drug around to different churches with different family members, different experiences there. I've been exposed to the Baptist, the Church of Christ, Christian Science, the Unity Church, Episcopalian.
Christian Science. No.
Don't ask me any details on that. I just know that we went through that for a little bit with someone in our lives.
I'm thinking of, is that the Church of Scientology? Is that?
I honestly don't even know.
Okay.
I just remember my stepmother at one point was experimenting with different things, and so we would just kind of go wherever we were taken.
Well, at least you got a good
exposure to a lot of different religions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Did any of it stick? Do you remember going, hey, this is something I enjoy?
Honestly, the only really happy, I had a couple of happy experiences. Mostly it was through any type of a Sunday school where we did outdoor activities. Mm-hmm. I felt like I would actually fit into those scenarios a lot better than sitting in a room and talking about the Bible because I didn't know the Bible. But I could play.
Yeah.
I could explore, and I could participate in water activities. That's whenever I felt like I could actually belong to a group, was whenever there was any kind of, outdoor
like you kind of
type
fit
activity. In. Right. The other exposure I had to, actually it was the Unity Church, I believe, in Dallas, whenever I was younger. That Sunday school class would encourage us to sit together and meditate. And that blew my mind. That was my absolute favorite thing to ever have done in a church
Really?
setting.
How long was it, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15? Do you remember?
I couldn't tell you. It was just a couple times that I got to do that. And then again, we were kind of shuffled along to a new experience again. So.
Well, it's interesting. I'm not sure if you heard the podcast that we had in here, one of them last week. It was a gentleman who got sober through specifically meditation only.
Right.
And very interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
But so that was your favorite part growing up, that meditation and the activities and such. And okay, so you had a younger brother. And okay, so take me from there then. So that was your exposure to religion. At some point, I'm assuming you started to qualify for this thing we call Alcoholics Anonymous. Did you start experimenting with drugs, alcohol early, or when did that start?
I did. My first drink was at the age of 10. It was just a few months after my father had passed away.
Oh, so your dad passed away.
He did, yeah.
How did he pass? How did he?
It was an airplane crash, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
Just on the edge of Dallas in 1985, October 1st at 3 p.m. And so...
so take me through that again. So you're 10 years old.
Right, right.
Was he, when you said he died in a plane crash, was it like a little plane?
It was a collision in the air. And
really?
So he was in a smaller company jet. It was a jet, so it was a little bigger, but it collided with something like a 2-seater, smaller airplane. So there was some shift change or something involved, and so...
with the air traffic controllers, you mean?
Right.
I mean, that is highly unusual.
It is.
For two planes to crash. So, I mean, do you remember that day and, how you...
Well, I remember, snapshots,
yeah.
And so as a 10-year-old, I remember coming home after school, and at 3 p.m., it had taken a little bit for everything to happen, and then the phone call came, and I remember watching my stepmother answer the phone and kind of seeing her react to that. And then immediately I turned very numb, and I remember walking out in the backyard. And that's really all I remember of the rest of that day was just sort of like it was hitting me, and I guess went into shock.
What about the funeral? Do you remember much from it?
I do remember the funeral, mostly because I was very much a tomboy, and I was forced to wear this horrible dress that I didn't want to wear. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be around all these people. Again, was sort of just drug along to things. I remember walking in, and there were so many people. There were hundreds and hundreds of people. So that was that moved me, even as a child, to see that my father had touched that many people. That he was the kind of guy that he would, from what I've learned and what I knew personally, was different from what other people would tell me. We learn about our parents from their behavior with other people, and he was the kind of guy that would stop everything and go help someone else. And he had a photographic memory, so he was incredibly smart. He was valedictorian of his graduating classes in high school and junior college and at Texas Tech. And
did he go to high school here in Dallas? Do you know?
Actually, he went to school in West Texas, a little bitty tiny town called Amherst.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
So he's from a very small town.
Yeah.
And then went to college at a junior college, and then came back and finished at Texas Tech. So that's where my parents met, was in Lubbock at Texas Tech.
Do you remember being especially close to him through were you daddy's girl?
I was a daddy's girl, yeah. Mostly because I wasn't around him as much as I really wanted to be. He worked a lot, and my mother left him when I was about 7 years old. Okay. So something else about me too is that whenever I try to recall my childhood, I really have, it's very spotty memories, and as, in fact, the longer I'm in recovery and the more I go through these steps and the more experiences I have in my life, it's sort of unfolding more of that, and I've had a lot more come back to me, the good memories. My brother used to be so frustrated with me because he and my mom would talk about these trips we would go on, and I'm just completely not there. I don't have any recollection of some of those things. But over the course of this program, though, I have been able to rediscover the good and the bad. As I start to find solution onto my problems, then it also is reminding me of what gratitude in life I have had since I was born, and those memories are starting to come back, and it's really great. It's a new experience of life, really.
Wow,
it's truly been reborn, yeah.
Right, it's like, and this says in the Big Book, we've been reborn, and that word reborn gets a lot of bad press, if you will, nowadays. But I love the word especially from an Alcoholics Anonymous perspective, because we get to see life through new lenses, if you will.
Absolutely. I feel like I have truly been awakened. I really feel like I've kind of been just sleepwalking through life.
Wow.
It's a completely amazing experience.
Okay, so I picked up on a couple of things. Number one, it looks like your mom left your father when you were 7, and it looks like he got remarried.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I don't,
She did too.
What's that?
She did too.
Okay, she got married as well.
Right.
Okay, she got remarried as well. So you're living with your dad the whole time, your dad and your stepmom, or did you live with your mom at all?
No, I was back and forth. Back and forth.
All right.
So, my mother, when she left, I was born in Dallas. They had relocated there, and that's where they had the kids. And so I remember going to school. We lived in Mesquite, and so my father would drive to Dallas to go to work downtown. And that was an interesting experience. I was a thumb sucker, so I was always kind of hiding in the corner. I was very shy. I was very withdrawn. And honestly, I just was kind of born that way. Right. It's not anything that happened to me that I've ever been able to find. Right. It's just kind of my nature. It's just...
And in all candidness with the group here, with whoever's listening, we sat down beforehand, and I could tell Jacqui was now she's warmed up, which is good now, right? But you could just see that look on her face. She was like, I do not want to do this, but I know that I should be, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick it out. Very shy. And that's just your personality, right?
It is my personality.
But that's another reason I wanted to have you in here.
So there's a lot of things that I do in recovery now for you, for this podcast, or for the group, or for my just my fellows in general, that I never would have done.
It gets you out of your comfort
recovery
zone.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm finding that the more I explore these fears, and I kind of go through the fear afraid, on the other side, it's really not that big a deal. So.
Right.
And then the next time I do it is a little bit easier. And then as long as I keep doing it, that's the main thing for me.
You got to keep practicing.
Keep pushing forward, yeah.
All right, so you had your first drink when you were 10.
I did. It was a New Year's Eve party, I believe, that my stepmother had taken me. And I had an older stepbrother, too. He was 4 years older than me, and then my brother is 4 years younger than me. So I was like the middle kid in that situation, right? But we went to a New Year's Eve party with other friends of my stepmother, and the kids were in the back area hanging out, and my stepbrother had introduced me to the punch bowl, and he thought it would be funny. And
the family punch bowl.
So that was my first drink and my first blackout, and
wow! So you had more than
sleeping under the kitchen
one
table,
little sip.
And we
really?
had a bunch.
You were under the table. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Did the parents notice this? Did the adults?
Yeah, I mean, they had to carry me home. I don't know if he ever got in trouble for it, or if they just kind of blew it off. But it was New Year's Eve. They were probably enjoying things themselves.
Right.
So there was never any conversation about it, though.
Okay, so it was all uphill from there. Then I'm just kidding. All right, so you have your first drink at 10, you black out. So take me,
but it
kind
affected
of a quick.
me.
Yeah.
I knew how to numb anything at that point, and so I probably started. I don't know, I would say maybe 11 or 12, the sneaking out. My stepbrother, I would hang out with him and his friends, and, he was a teenager, so just, it was available whenever I wanted it, and kind of went from there. And that's when I learned how to become very good at sneaking out, and even hiding from him at one point, that was where I remember one time he caught me sneaking out of the house, and I was about 13, and he was furious because he couldn't keep an eye on me, and he saw me leaving and confronted me when I got back home.
Really?
So, but yeah,
when you would sneak out, were you going out to be with friends and drink or whatever?
Friends.
Okay.
I was back in Dallas, I was still back and forth between mom and dad, but the reason I wasn't at my mother at that point was when, backing up before my father had passed away, I had been primarily staying with my mother, and my mom had been struggling with her own addictions. And so when she left my father... What kind of
addictions was she struggling with?
What I've learned since then, well, as she actually confessed to me, was that she liked speed, and she liked it with needles. And I walked in on her a couple times and got to kind of experience that. And as a young child, even though it was never talked about, I knew exactly what she was doing.
How old were you when you saw this?
8 or 9, I guess.
Wow.
When I first saw it. But Mom would also take me to, when we left Dad and we went to Lubbock, we lived with her sister. And her sister was what you would call a red light girl.
Oh, okay.
And so we were around people. They were always there for a party. There was always alcohol.
That's your mom's sister, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
there was always different kinds of drugs. It wasn't in front of me, but it was around the house. And so I would see some things happening and some activities, and doors would be shut and that kind of stuff. So,
wow. How old are you? I'm sorry. How old are you?
Well, it was between the ages of 7 and 10. So,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So anyway, we lived with her for a little bit, and then Mom moved out on her own. And from that point, we would go from rent house to rent house to rent house, and different kinds of schools. Just it was very disruptive for me. I was probably, I very rarely ever had any friends because we moved so often, and I was already shy. I mean, it takes me a little while to kind of warm up to people and trust them, and so. I remember having a couple of friends that, one of them in particular was a little girl that lived next door to me that had a mental handicap. And I really was super comfortable around her. We would play and play and play because there was no judgment. I didn't have to be this pretty girl in a pretty dress. I could just be myself and play. And I remember that was one of my favorite childhood memories, actually, was just playing, you know. And then, I also had a little bit of sort of expected and also adopted it as being kind of a caregiver to my little brother. So, he's 4 years younger than me. Yeah. He's little.
Right.
And so I always had him in his hand, dragging him around with me. And Mom would be, I think Mom had jobs sometimes, but most of the time she just wasn't around. And when she would come home, it would be to bed. She would come home and kind of, that's tired. Where she was, or the couch, or, obviously I know that she took care of us. She had to, somebody had to feed us, but I also remember going and getting food a lot of times, like riding my bike to go get the food from the convenience store and making sandwiches and macaroni and cheese.
Right.
So there was a lot of that, and then she would have her good sides and her bad sides. It was just a roller coaster of kind of crazy for her for a little while. But she did remarry, and we did have, I did have my own room at that point, and that's whenever things really started to change for her.
How old were you then? Do you remember?
I couldn't, between the ages of 7.
It
was probably about
7 and 10?
Yeah, but
okay,
8
I'm
or
sorry,
9
I didn't
or
know if
something
this
like
was
that. And
later or not.
Yeah, it was crazy. My she ended up. That's whenever I walked in on her for the first time, and she blamed it on having a hysterectomy or an operation of some sort, and that her doctor told her she had to take it. And that's whenever things got interesting at school too. So I at school, they started to call me in and ask me questions about my home life and what was going on there, and how I responded was about the same way that I treated her until the day she died. Was, my mom is great, she loves me, there's nothing going on. The only medication I've ever seen her take was like aspirin. I was lying from the beginning. I wanted to protect my mother. My mother, even though she wasn't what other people consider, a great mom, she was my world. I loved her. She gave me the love when she had it available.
Right.
And I was going to protect her and my brother as much as I could.
And I'm assuming the fear would be that you would lose even that little bit of love if you told the truth. So, right.
So, and I was so far from my father that I didn't really see him that often during that time. I also found out that she kind of hid us from him because she didn't want to lose us. So I think moving around a lot had a lot to do with that too.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't, understand her now, but
right.
have become more aware of what addiction really is. And
wow. Okay, so let's get on maybe up into your teenage years then. So
so teenage years, another interesting thing happened then. So after my father passed away and I was living with my stepmom and my stepbrother and my little brother here in Dallas, then I started to have some consequences of my drinking, sneaking out, relationships that I shouldn't be in, and that kind of activity really caused a lot of drama at home, and stepmom just decided that was something that she wasn't able to control anymore, and so she decided it was time for me to go back to my mom. And what happened was when my father passed away, my mother wasn't at the funeral because the understanding, I don't have proof of anything, I just know what people tell me, but
right.
The understanding was that she was in a hospital at the time because of her use. She had put herself in a situation where she was hospitalized from being attacked. And so mom wasn't at the funeral, but during that attack, I guess the police got involved and she ended up having to find recovery herself very quickly. So I don't know if she did any jail time or not, but I know that she was on probation for quite a while. So by the time my stepmother was ready for us to go back to live with mom's sober at this point. And she has remarried again. So this is her third marriage, my second stepdad.
Okay.
And it's in the middle of a cotton field and one of the most remote settings that I could have ever experienced. We lived outside of town and we're surrounded by pine trees, and we had a satellite dish to watch TV, but other than that, it was outside in a remote area outside of Lubbock. And so I got to kind of grow up in that setting for a little bit. My mother's own untreated alcoholism, she was like a dry drunk at that point. She was so isolated and so sick that it really took a toll on me and my brother. We still had to kind of fend for ourselves a little bit. She was slept a lot, very depressed. She didn't have outside friends. We didn't go to church together. My stepdad, though, would take us to church, and we would go, and it was hard, but my brother and I really clinged to each other, and we ended up just sort of, and then at some point we ended up moving into town, which is so funny because the town is only about 500 people, so we got a house there, and that's where I started to, I immediately got a job as soon as I was old enough to work. And
how old was that? Do you remember? I mean, approximately?
Oh, I started at 15.
15?
Yeah. Because I wanted to get out of the house, I was like, I gotta get out of this house. And I liked having my own money because I didn't like having to ask for things.
Right.
So, but one of the things that was the hardest was my mother was very strict. But yeah, my first job was actually working for Texas Water Rampage. I don't know. Anybody out there that's from Lubbock knows Texas Water Rampage.
What is it? Is that
it's just a little water park.
Water park. Okay, gotcha.
Crappy little water park. But I worked there for a whole day, and then got another job offer from Little Caesars across from Texas Tech University. So I went over there and I started flipping pizzas. And oh man, that was my dream job. I got to see these guys from college coming over to order pizza. I was happy, But anyway,
so your mom was really strict, I think you said.
Yeah. So my mom was really strict, and part of that was, whenever I at the age of 13 or whatever, and I went back to live with her, my grandma, my real father that passed away, wanted to take all the grandkids on a vacation, and so I was the oldest of all the little cousins, and I had my little sidekick at the time was very close to the same age, and she and I were considered to be old enough when we went on vacation to Disney World and Epcot and all those places that we could kind of run off and do our own thing. Mm-hmm. And so she was we were buddies, right? So we ended up finding some people that we shouldn't have been talking to and making arrangements to explore the city a little bit after everybody else went to bed.
Right.
And I ended up making contact with someone that was older than me. And
how much older? You remember?
8 or 9 years older than me.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that kind of
Kibosh that.
grew into a very awkward collect-call relationship, you know? So whenever we went back home and I was living in the middle of this cotton field, I would reach out in the middle of the night here and there to make contact with this person. And at some point he ended up saying, you know what, I've got to go. I'm from overseas and I'm going to go back overseas. Would you be interested in coming with me? And that's whenever I said, hell yeah, let's go. And so I ended up living in London for about a year, and maybe not a year, maybe more like
Do you
9
remember
months
the
or something.
Conversation of whoever you're telling I'm going to London and what came?
Yeah, he just asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, yeah, I do.
No, I mean, not him, but your friends and family?
I didn't have any friends, really, so
Family?
I just left in the middle of the night in a cab.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the middle of a cotton field. So anyway, I went and did that for a little bit, and then eventually I ran out of money, and I met some Americans when I was over there, and they kind of took me in because that turned out to be a really bad situation. They kind of gave me a place to stay, and eventually they said, you know what, you're so depressed and you're drinking and using other things that we don't know if we're going to come home and find you alive. And so that scared me a little bit. My stepmom back in Dallas knew someone there in London, and made an arrangement for us to have lunch together, and he actually sent me back home. He bought my plane ticket back home. So I came back. She contacted my mom. I went back home. And so within my freshman year, I ended up leaving, coming back, and then going to Texas Tech to take classes to get caught back up in school.
Wow.
So I went right back into my sophomore year. So the last 3 years of high school were on lockdown. My mom had me on lockdown. So it was really a gift for me to be able to have a car and get a job. And so anyway, I had to really fine tune any other extracurricular activities, So I got really good at manipulating people, being very careful on how I was going to get around without being detected.
Wow.
Out in the middle of nowhere. So
wow, yeah.
Interesting how that all turned out, but
just real quick. We just do a little announcement here we do in the middle. It says, we will continue our conversation with Jacqui in just a moment. She'll go ahead and grab a little sip there to kind of get her throat loosened up, if you will. Just a reminder, you are listening to Sober Speak. You will find us on the World Wide Web as SoberSpeak.com. There you'll find approximately 30 or so other episodes you can listen to. You can also find the donate button on the website, which you can utilize if you move to do such. Please keep in mind, this is a podcast funded by you, the listener. And I want to say this. I've just had a few people ask me this week about the money part, and I don't even like bringing it up, right? But I can guarantee you this, I promise you this, I would never, ever even consider making, quote, money off of this thing. This is really to help me break even. And if you're moved to donate, you can. If not, no big deal. But Sober Speak is a self-supporting organization through our own contributions. We are not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. We do not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorse nor oppose any causes. Now back to Jacqui. So, you're on lockdown. You're making it through your last few years of high school, and take me from there.
Well, luckily I didn't have any more consequences from drinking at this point. I was actually going to school and doing well, and I didn't really have anybody to get it from anyway. But
just out of curiosity, I want to go back to that person who, those people who found you in London, kind of took you under their wing and flew you back. Do they have any idea that you're doing well now? Do you have?
I've had no contact with them.
Okay,
no.
Just wondering, just curious. All right, so. I'm sorry I interrupted you because that was I just think about those people and wow, what good hearts to get this little girl basically, back to the United States. So, all right, go ahead.
So yeah, I graduated high school. I did fairly well in school. I had every intention to go to California to go to school. I wanted to be a marine biologist. I was very good in science and math, and I also had a love for art, though. That is interesting how that comes back up. So my mom tells me, she goes, please, just whatever you do your first year at Texas Tech so you stay close to home, and then go do whatever you want. And so I agreed to do that, and that was while I was still a senior in high school, of course. And so as I got toward graduation, the tension with Mom, of course, was pretty high, and I ended up completely leaving home the day after graduation. She made it very clear that because I told her, I was like, I'm a graduate, I'm going to go to the graduation party, and I'll see you when I see you. And she said, no, that's not how it works. You're going to be home by midnight. So, of course, midnight comes and goes. I get the phone call in the morning, and I just go and clean everything out and get an apartment. And so that's kind of where that went. And I ended up meeting the girl who agreed to room with me. We got an apartment together. After about a week or so together, she introduced me to her brother, who I ended up marrying and having 2 children with. Oh. And yeah, that changed my entire plan, of course, of going to California to be a marine biologist was gone. And but that's my beautiful children, you know. I was blessed with motherhood a little bit sooner than I wanted to, but they kept me alive.
Wow.
You know, they kept me alive. So I had something to live for.
Boy and a girl?
2 girls.
2 girls?
Yeah.
Okay.
4 years apart. So needless to say, though, I didn't finish college, which, hello, resentment number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, being young. And,
yeah.
And number 3, moving. It wasn't that far. We just moved to the Permian Basin, so 100 miles away, and lived out there in Odessa for a little bit, and then Midland's right next door, so we moved there.
Okay.
So that's where my girls were raised, was in Midland.
Okay, so anything interesting to know about the marriage? Was it, how long were you? Are you still married to them?
No,
okay, gotcha.
No. We were married 13 years. The last probably 5 years of our lives were basically for the children. We both had our own kind of just growing up together, changing, right. And that's whenever I started to discover that I wanted to have some kind of a career. I wanted to do something for myself. I was very selfish anyway, and it was time for me to have my, explore any other professional careers that I wanted to explore. I got involved in sales for a little bit, which is totally opposite of what my personality is. But as long as I had that drink in me, I could do and say and be anything that I wanted to be, The problem was that I had to do that and keep doing it to continue to be brave enough to do it the next day, right? So eventually that really started to cause some big problems because I had joined the Junior League of Midland and had all these adventures with other people that like to drink with me, and that didn't really go over so well back at home with the marriage. So, that caused a lot of problems. So that
full 13 years you're drinking or
well, yeah,
on and off,
we drank a lot together.
Okay.
But, he was able to kind of be a hard drinker, and I needed it every day, all the time. I started to be the last one up. Right.
Were the kids noticing any of this?
We were always really good about not drinking around them as much as getting them to bed early.
Right.
And then having that little...
As soon as the sun goes
drink,
down.
Yeah, as soon as the kids were in bed. So that part didn't really get out of hand, though, until after the divorce. And then that's when my drinking got a little bit worse.
Okay, so you got divorced. And what year was that? Do you remember?
It was final 2009.
2009. So, and then the drinking kind of picks up from there. Did you have custody of the girls, or who?
Well, I'd had an affair, and that also contributed a lot to my drinking. Just always wanting something better, always wanting to do something different, always wanting to find some relief in something. I just didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. My kids were pretty sheltered from a lot of that anxiety, but they knew that I was a very controlling mother. I expected them to do things a certain way, and the discipline was pretty high. I mean, they were happy kids, though. we were always involved in sports and activities, and we'd go to church here and there. But mostly I always wanted to present it to them in a way that they could find their own path in spirituality, and which is interesting because my oldest daughter did actually get really involved in it in her high school years, and got herself baptized there at the church in Midland, one of them, and it was a very beautiful experience for her. And so that was kind of like totally not me. That was all God. I didn't kind of push her in that direction. But no, the children were great. It so happens though that the man that I had the affair with, we had a brief moment of not being together anymore when all that hit the fan, and then I ended up we reconnected, and I ended up marrying him, and so now my daughters were experiencing a blended family, and their father had actually remarried too pretty quickly, and so it was just their father ended up moving back here. It lives in Frisco actually. And so they went through a stepdad for 5 years, a blended family, and a mom that was just getting sicker and sicker. So my resentment list was getting extremely long. So I was drinking at a lot of things. My mom was actually very sick too.
You mean sick like she was like...
Yeah, she had her own consequences, from her own use. And so her body was failing, a lot of problems there. And she actually even, my stepdad called me and he said, "Hey, your mom's in the hospital and you need to come." And so once I got there, I found out she was by that point, she was in a coma. She went into the hospital for pneumonia, ended up getting a staph infection that attacked her insides, and ate a big hole in her heart and half of her lungs and shut down her kidneys. And so anyway, she was under this coma for a little bit, and I asked the doctor, I said, "What's going on? How does it get to this point?" And he goes, "Well, you should probably ask your dad, since she's been using for quite some time." I was like, "Yeah, that was 10 years ago." And he said, "Yeah, no. Apparently they know more than they haven't been telling you." So then I get to rediscover that again. And,
what was she using? Was it the speed?
Yeah, that was her go-to. So I am not emotionally handling this very well, and I ended up just leaving the hospital and kind of dealing with that. Was the first migraine I'd ever experienced, and so now my anxiety is like taking on a whole new level at this point, and and I can't drink fast enough, so my alcoholism has kind of been in waves, trying to keep it together for my family and the job and whatever life that I had created at that point. It was not an unsafe environment. I mean, we had mortgages and we had cars, and, it was always just kind of what I thought was a normal life. Right. But I wasn't coping with life really at all at this point, so.
Wow. So, I'm listening to you thinking, okay, I know what you read there to begin with about the deep and effective spiritual experience. And, the word that keeps going through my head is redemption. That may be a little bit of a too religious word for some people, but, the odds are stacked against you. I mean, this is not, this is not one of these things where you go, "Oh, this is going to be a good life," right?
God wasn't available for me, not at that point that I thought.
Okay.
So,
all right. So this is what, 2010 or so now. So take me from there. I mean, obviously at some point.
My second marriage, my children, at this point, I've got a teenage daughter who's making me crazy.
Yeah, just like you
do. Mom, a blended family, a job that's not doing what I want them to do. I want them to know that I'm amazing, and they need to promote me. Right. And and so, and 2012 was probably one of my darkest years.
So you're a career woman. I mean, you like...
I like to work, yeah. I tried to be a stay-home mom for about a year, and my depression was really bad, really, really bad. And then, so it's better for the whole family if mommy's working.
Mommy's working. Okay, so you're working, you're trying to build a career.
Because I can't stay home with the stuff in my head.
Yeah.
I can't sit still like that.
Right.
be available, to entertain other people. I gotta go.
You gotta go.
So, but 2012 was really dark for me. It was the year that my oldest daughter graduated. My youngest daughter was having her own anxiety with becoming a teenager and going into high school, having a lot of problems with the girls. Girls are mean, Yeah. My mother was really, really sick. And so I remember coming home and telling my daughters my relationship with my current husband was actually starting to get a little on the physically abusive side to each other. That's what when we drink, we find partners who drink like us, right? So, and I'm not going to speak for him, but I know that there was some activity that did involve police that I was not the one in there, right? But it was enough to scare me that I was willing to go to rehab to fix our marriage, to fix the alcohol problem, and I had already been exposed to AA through another friend that used to drink with me, who came back and showed me how different her life is. So I knew there was recovery, and I knew that alcohol was starting to get into the conversation. I had been begging for us to get sober, for me and him to do it together, because we can't drink together. Right. It just isn't working. Like, this is oil and water. It's not mixing anymore. And so I made arrangements to go to what I told my daughters was a mommy retreat, to have a little vacation, and they were like, yes. They said, yes, you're crazy. Go take a vacation, please. And so I did, and that's where I got to experience being separated from my environment for the first time. I'd never really been alone with myself like that. Not like that. And no drink. And that was unbelievably uncomfortable. I didn't speak to anybody for the first week that I was there in this 30-plus day program that I had signed up for. And an incredibly part of Texas, too, that I highly recommend. If anybody wants to know, just let me know. But it was some of the best things, the seeds that we talk about being planted. Yeah. I'd already had a friend of mine show me her life change. She had already taken me to a meeting. I had already experienced some conversations and started to see that they did it and hear their stories and where they came from. So I was ready to try something. I didn't know what it was, really. I just knew that rehab was going to fix all their lives. It could probably fix mine too, right? But some other things that I learned about was therapy in general, right? I learned that my counselors were telling me that I probably had some what they would call PTSD that applied to childhood trauma, having waking up in certain situations with adult activities that were inappropriate, and being, I had a time in my life where I was molested by older people, and I had, people dying in my life, and I had just exposure to all these things that I never had processed as a child, and I never had anyone take me to a doctor to get me the care that I needed. So the counselors in that setting really opened my eyes and gave me checklists, kind of like, are we an alcoholic? Should we be here? Right. Well, I also had that for other trauma in my life and abuse in my life and things that I qualify for. So I got to take those seeds back and explore those later too. And that's what actually ended up helping me find that no matter what I would do to fix the checklists, I still couldn't stop drinking. My oldest daughter went to college. My youngest daughter went to live with her father. I divorced my second husband. I relocated across the state, which I know is very common for alcoholics too. My mother passed away. My stepfather had passed away before that. I'd lost several grandparents. 2012 was pretty trippy for me. It was really, really dark. And I went to a couple more facilities myself, and one of them included a psychiatric facility because I had attempted had some suicidal moments. And, crazy people were that was my tribe. I was starting to get to where I really was comfortable being locked up because I could kind of have my little safe spots where I didn't have to deal with life, right? And But anyway, I always had to go back to it. I always had to go, and I still was really struggling with dealing with anything at this point. And so whenever I relocated and I came to back up here to Frisco, actually, I wanted to be close to my youngest daughter who had gone back to live with her father, which I was voluntarily saying, you know what, it's time. And so after my divorce and I came here, I still was living in a roommate scenario, and I was experiencing a pretty ugly divorce. And but I had a moment where I knew that whenever I would open, the cooler to the beer, because I'd already gone to all the 7-Elevens. They all knew me. I would bounce around so they wouldn't think I was an alcoholic, right? We all have that story. But I knew that I had already moved up the list of the stronger beers. I had already found the bigger bottles of wine, and they were not working anymore. And I knew that if I was now I was buying the whole case at a time. And I was starting to think about harder liquor because I knew that it would get me where I needed to go, but I didn't want to be an alcoholic, right. Even though I was going 3 days without leaving the house and drinking straight. And I had a moment where I knew that I absolutely, it was kicking my ass. I wasn't going to be able to stop. And I knew that I had someone not too far from me that I went to rehab with who had still stayed sober through this whole time. And so I called her up and I was like, you're really doing this, aren't you? Like, you're making this your life, right? She said, absolutely. Yeah. And so I got to kind of sit in that for a little bit, and I just broke down. I absolutely broke down. I was like, I can't do this anymore, because I had already had suicidal moments, and I'd already had, the pistol out of the case, literally. And I knew that it was just in my closet if I needed it again. And that was an option again. That was something that I'd already screwed everything up. And that was a consideration. And I didn't really want to do that. I was too chicken to do that. But I also really just didn't want to. I wanted to have that life that I saw y'all having. And so I called her back and I was like, I really want this. I really, really want this. I really don't want to drink again. Please help me not drink again. I don't want to do it anymore. And so that's when I walked into the Frisco group and showered with love. And oh boy, that was a safe place. I was safe. I was allowed to be crazy, and it was okay because it was going to get better. And so, yeah, there was some moments of kind of white knuckling it through things, but I had people in my life that wanted to share that experience with me, that were willing to let me cry on their shoulder, that were going to be there if I needed to talk, if I needed to go to dinner, if I needed to read about this stuff, if I wanted to go to a speaker meeting. I mean, I really clung to it. I was so desperate to find out what it is that was making your life so wonderful that, it's like I was saying, got a sponsor from the day one. Man, I knew I didn't even want to walk in there without a sponsor. I called my old sponsor from Midland, and she put me in contact with people here. That's what strong recovery, and we know everybody everywhere, right? Like, it's so funny. And that's what I did. And, and I had a few different sponsors, but that's okay because I got what I needed. They got what they needed. It was a great relationship while it lasted until things shifted around and schedules, conflicts and things. And I got a new sponsor, and now I've been with this one for a few years. In fact, I met her this morning, and she said, Jacqui, you are so different when I first started working with you. And for someone else to tell me that, I forget sometimes. I forget how crazy it was. So you asking me to tell my story is such a gift, because just like those spotty moments in my childhood, if I don't talk about it and have that, now it's a gift to be able to share to another woman or anybody, right, that wants to talk about what recovery is like, to come from such darkness where I was the kid at the crack house playing cards in the corner. I know what it's like to be hungry and to wear shoes that are too small and to be pulled into, it's so different. Life is so different now. And I have been absolutely through so many miracles in this program that it blows my mind. And, I still struggle with having these moments, where it talks about the bedevilments in here, and knowing that whenever I start to have any anger or worry or depression or jealousy or any of these things, those are signs that I needed to maybe change up my program, and my recovery has shifted, and maybe I'm trying to take back ownership of my life instead of giving it back to God. So my spirituality has changed because I came in at that level of desperation where I absolutely was floored and willing to do anything. I gave up. Like my sponsor told me this morning, I said, "Uncle, I'm done. I'm ready." And but I have to be careful. I have to actually do the maintenance part of all of this, and I have to continue with the legacy, and I have to do the meeting steps and service. I have to always be active. For me in my recovery, it has to wake up with God first and go to bed with God last, and that's whenever I have my happy serenity spot, and I don't have to go through a pink cloud. I can just have a beautiful, serene life that's even keel. And so that's what I strive for. I have my crazy still coming in and out, but it's a hell of a lot better than it used to be, and I'm just going to keep doing this. So
that's great. Okay, so
you're speechless.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a lot of information.
No, that was great. And what I was thinking during the past 15 minutes is you came here to sit down behind this mic, and I know you were nervous. But as soon as you started going and really thinking about your recovery and what it had done for you, you loosened up tremendously. And I'm so glad you were able to come to here and sit down at this mic and share your story. And I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you. I'm grateful for my relationship with my children. I'm very close to my girls. I have a little granddaughter.
You have a granddaughter? You're a grandmother?
Yes, she turns 3 very soon. And, I've got a pretty amazing career, a completely new industry. I work in kind of the financial technology field, and it's really cool, and I get to have some service involved in technology that's a little uncomfortable at times because I don't know everything about everything, but if I can offer my service in any way, then that's what I'm going to do.
One thing I do want to ask you about real quick before we wrap up, people here in North Texas, we recently lost one of our, I don't even know how to refer to him. We lost a man that was important to a lot of us in our lives. His name was George. I've talked about him on one podcast before. He fell off of a ladder, and I know that he was like I don't know how like a father figure to you.
He was. Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you just say whatever you want to say about George before we get off here?
George is huge in my recovery, actually. He saw me when I came in, and he knew that I'd had the life kicked out of me, and we were actually having burritos after a meeting with a bunch of people one time, and I was just talking about how, I probably need to get a job, and and so anyway, he offered me a job. I actually went to work for George for a little while. That whole summer, I worked for him. He was a subcontractor. He's a carpenter, and I got to go through a completely different industry. That was, I went from the corporate world to actually wearing boots and jeans and working with some kind of some tools. And yeah, he was truly a father figure for me. We talked God and we talked AA all the time. He showed me what it was like to just show up, and God's going to kind of take over, and this is what you do. If you just kind of give it up, then the program is going to do for you, and God's going to do for you what you cannot do for yourselves. And it also gave me a way to kind of work through the physical aspect of it, meaning like hard work in recovery. Like working out is good for as a therapy even, right? So, but I can't tell you all of the ways that he has helped me in my program, and it's been just an absolute amazing experience with that man as a mentor and a friend, and yes, like you said, a father figure, a brother figure. He would rather me say brother than father, but it was a really beautiful relationship because I got to see him giving service to everyone around him. I met so many people through him. One of my good friends, Isabel, is someone that isn't even in recovery, and she has turned out to become someone really instrumental in my spiritual growth too. And I just, I can't, I don't even know what to say because it was, he taught me what it means for a man to show love for a woman without anything else. There was no agenda. It truly was talking about God and talking about AA. All the time. I asked questions all the time. It was amazing.
Very nice. Yeah. We all miss George. God bless him at the big meeting in the sky. With his overalls on. And as somebody said, I think I heard Renee said, or somebody said at his funeral service, he's a newcomer today. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that was a great service.
It was a great service. Well, all right, Jacqui with a Q, by the way, just in case you're spelling that at home. Well, I sure did enjoy that. I'm sure everybody else did. Once again, I want to thank Don C. for going to our website, clicking on the donate tab, and submitting a contribution. Your generosity is appreciated. Well, we welcome your thoughts and feedbacks. We would love to hear from us. If you want to pass on a message to Jacqui or to any of the other speakers, let me know. You can contact us at feedback@soberspeak.com. Eventually here, I plan on putting a little voice mechanism on the website where you can actually dial in, leave a voice message if you like. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit better with this technology all the time. I had speaking of, like you said on your job, I had absolutely zero idea of what I was doing when I first started this, and I'm getting a little bit better every week. So we realize we know only a little, and I'm going to read from page 164 of the big book. Just to close us out here, and it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God, admit your faults to Him and to your fellows, clear away the wreckage of your past, give freely of what you find, and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, Jacqui, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for doing this and for having me.
You're welcome. You take care now. Bye-bye.